This is the new Lumix L10, a small, compact, everyday carry style camera. And it's definitely going against a few of the normal trends of a lot of these other style of everyday cameras with a micro four thirds sensor and a zoom lens. So today we'll talk about this camera, where it kind of fits in the whole line of these other small compact cameras, and show a ton of images as I've basically brought it every single place I've gone in the last couple of weeks. And I'll obviously give you my thoughts on where I think this kind of fits in the market. Now, Lumix isn't sponsoring this video. They're not seeing it before I put it out, anything like that. It does say sample on the back as well. So for the people who think, oh, maybe you're just getting to keep this forever and you could sell it, I don't think that's going to be the case because it says sample on the back. But I will be keeping this as long as Lumix will allow me to, because I think it does fit an area of my photography that none of my other cameras do fit. So Lumix, if you want this back, I'll send it back, obviously, but I will definitely be keeping it as long as they allow me to. So right off the bat, let's compare this to some of the other cameras out there. This is the X100F, but it's the same size as, the other X100 series. So we're looking at pretty identical in size. And if we're adding in here the Lumix S9 with its 18-40, the grip here definitely makes it larger than it would be otherwise. But we are looking at very, 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 very similar bodies. The S9 is a little bit thicker this way, which does make some sense to me at least, because the S9 has a much larger sensor, a full frame sensor over a micro four thirds sensor. And because it doesn't have an integrated lens, it has a interchangeable lens mount. We also have IBIS in here. So I think a few of those things make sense as to why the thickness of the S9 is a little bit bigger than the thickness of the L10. I will say as well, there is no front grip on the S9 at all. So this is actually the first time I've taken this little grip off since this camera came back from Japan with me from the launch of the S9 2 years ago. So it is definitely an integrated part of this camera that I've never considered taking off. And the only reason I did was for this comparison. But I will say that the L10 definitely has thought more about this. It's not a camera like the S9. I wouldn't carry this around, or I wouldn't want to without this grip. And if you are considering purchasing an S9, the grip is something I would consider an essential accessory. That being said, the L10 here does have this little grip. It's not very big, but because the camera is so small and light, that little grip here and then the slight little thumb grip here on the back make it so that I can hold this really easily, even with the lens here out, and not have any issues. If I'm doing more hybrid photo video stuff, I will say that this grip from SmallRig is really nice, but it is adding a little bit more, and part of the charm of this camera is that it's so small and light and compact. And adding this grip does add a little bit more heft to this camera and makes it a little bit less of a, hey, I feel like I can just grab this and go anywhere. Not that big a deal, but it just kind of is what it is. And especially if you're someone that's going to use this on a tripod at all, just having a base plate that has the Arca mount on it already and it allows you to just take it on and off a tripod makes this just an obvious thing to use. But I will say, if I'm just grabbing this as I'm going to go to my kid's baseball game or something like that, I'm most likely not going to want the grip on there. But anytime I'm thinking about doing any sort of video stuff on this, it is something I would want on there. So if that makes sense, I would just check it out. I think that the grip here from SmallRig is something that when they saw that I had the camera, they just asked hey, do you want any of the accessories for here? And I said, sure, why don't you send this over? I do think it's cool. I do think it's good for the camera, and I don't think it's that expensive. So it's kind of like hey, you might as well just try it out. But it is something that if I'm going out to do photos with this, I don't feel like I need, because the camera already has this nice little grip. Now let's talk about the lens here. It is a equivalent of a 24 to 75-ish f3.5 to 5.6. Obviously, the lens itself is not a 3.5 to 5.6. We have a 10.9 to 34 millimeter f1.7 to f2.8 lens. So that's the amount of light that's actually coming through and getting to the sensor. But if we're comparing the equivalencies in relative like depth of field and focal length of a 35 millimeter sensor, you're really getting like a 24 to 75 f3.5 to 5.6 apertured look at least. And what I think is interesting about this is that there are going to be a lot of people that are just going to throw this camera out right off the bat because it's a micro four thirds camera. I know that I, as someone that loves a shallow depth of field, and the reason why my compact camera of choice is the RX1R Mark III, because it has a full frame 35 millimeter f2 lens. What a lot of people don't think of though, is that a kind of 3.5 to 5.6 is like a pretty shallow and normal range. That's like a kit lens on most things. Are you gonna buy this camera and have this setup to have really, really shallow depth of field? No. You're gonna buy something like this, or the Leica Q series, or you're gonna buy the S9 and you're going to put some of the S primes on there, or adapt vintage lenses or something like that. Where this thing really shines, in my opinion, is the versatility of having a wider focal length that goes all the way up to a 75 millimeter focal length equivalent, which if you're going out to make more like snapshot style things, or you just don't care about shallow depth of field, this makes this an incredible camera for just documenting life in a way if you're not concerned about shallow depth of field. Because if I just went and looked at my Lightroom catalog and saw how many photos I've taken between 24 millimeters and 75 millimeters, that's gonna be 95% probably of the photos I've ever taken are in that kind of focal length range. And so as far as like a focal range goes, this is just covering the vast majority of what the vast majority of people do every day. And it's why like I own an Olympus compact camera that I think is a 28 to 80. Contax made their G series lens and they made a 35 to 70, I believe, f3.5 to 5.6. It just makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of historical precedence for this range and this type of aperture range as well to just exist in general. And I think it just makes a lot of sense if you want some range in your images to be able to punch into like a 75 millimeter and also have a wider lens at a 24 millimeter. There's a lot of things you can do on a higher megapixel sensor like this. Like I can punch in to a roughly 75 millimeter frame, but I can't go wider than the 35 that's already on here. And also this camera is $5,000 where this camera is like $1,500. Now, in terms of just general experience, this thing has a lot of the things that the S9 does not have. We have an EVF. Praise be, we have an EVF. So this is my primary way of going about photographing things. I love just being able to pull a viewfinder up to my face and do my work like that. I've actually had the back panel here closed almost the entire time. Even when I've been going through the menus, I've been looking through here. The only time that I haven't done that is the few times that I've held it down to just see what the video footage is like if I'm moving and things like that. But otherwise, I've had this closed completely and used it basically like a film point and shoot. And with that, I guess I will add that this has the same LUT button as the S9. It has the same complete version of all of the Lumix Lab stuff. So I can put my own LUTs, my dedicated Lightroom presets that I've made into LUTs onto this camera and have images straight out of the camera that are great. One of the things that I've done on this is I've changed this over to the Leica monochrome profile. I've also added a little bit of grain to the images. And I found that that combo, at least for me, has been such a cool way to have two different kind of looks. And don't get me wrong, having my LUTs on there are great. And in a pinch, it's been fantastic. But my workflow through this has been to shoot all black and white JPEGs. And then I've taken the raw files and then I've just run all those through with my look in Aftershoot. And then I have both a really good JPEG. I really like the black and white side of this. It's been super fun. And then I also have an edited raw file that I can go in and tweak to whatever I want in color. So being able to have both of these side by side has been fantastic. And I think as a kind of like memories snapshot camera, putting this in a dedicated black and white mode has been my personal favorite way to go. But the fact that you can shift and move so much stuff around, I do find that I I like this better even than the Fujifilm JPEGs. I know that I'm going to get some hate from that because people love their Fujifilm stuff so much. But being able to add, for me as someone that has my own LUTs, being able to put my own look directly into a camera and get that straight out of it is fantastic. And then I obviously have talked a lot about the Leica monochrome profile, but I find it to be really, really good on this camera. And it just gives me kind of like that filmic look that I'm looking for. And I think maybe because it's a different workflow and it's a lower megapixel camera, I'm much more pleased with the, I don't know, like more snapshotty results I'm getting out of this. Now, we've talked about the EVF, which is obviously a massive improvement. The other thing that we have is a hot shoe. So again, we have a hot shoe. We are able to jump in and just use a regular flash here. And you also have a leaf shutter in this camera, which is fantastic. You are able to flash sync at up to any shutter speed, which the max here, I believe, is 1/2000th of a second. So if you want to go for that direct flash look, if you want to just use it as kind of like a party snapshot style camera, I do think that at longer wedding receptions when I have some more time and whatnot, this is definitely going to be a camera that I'll toss around my neck and just take out and use, because I find 24 millimeters is a really ideal focal length for that kind of thing. And then for the rare times where I do like to kind of punch in a little bit more, I think this is going to be a really fun tool for things like that. Now we'll add that we can see a couple other things that I have on the table here. And if you've been eagle-eyed enough, you can see that we have a filter on the lens. Part of the reason here is I have two of these filters, both from Polar Pro, both from Short Stash. These are the everyday filters. If you can see in here, it is darker because it has a circular polarizing filter in it. Both of these do. One is just the regular mist filter, and then this one is a gold mist. And in doing that, it just kind of blooms the highlights a little bit. And this one in particular adds a bit of like a warm tone to the imagery. Now, the reason I have it on here specifically is because we are in summertime now. It's actually nice in the Pacific Northwest. And if you do want to use this camera at f1.7 at 24 millimeter equivalent in bright sunlight, you're not going to be able to do that with the 1/2000th of a second shutter speed. And the camera is pretty decent in rolling shutter, but I would rather not use the electronic shutter if I can get away with it. So the nice part about this, and you can see that I have it also on the RX1R Mark III here as well. Adding this to the package just makes it dark enough that you are able to use this at all shutter speeds in bright lights. It is an accessory that I find to be really good. This camera also has a bit of a unique way of going about using the sensor that it has. So there's no mode that you're fully getting the full amount of the micro four thirds sensor, but depending on the crop mode you're using, we have like, 16:9, 2:3, 4:3, a square crop. And if you use like a 16:9 frame, you actually get a little bit more of the width of the sensor without getting obviously the height. And then as it goes, you're just kind of filling up more of the sensor depending on which type of crop you're using. But it is something to note in this thing. So you aren't actually getting like the full 4:3 sensor if you're ever going to use this. Not that that ends up mattering too much, because I think that this again is like less of like a, I don't know, landscape camera or whatever, and more of like a good travel snapshot style camera. You do have this little selector switch on the top of the lens here, which by default is set to be those crop modes, but you can also move it to a number of different things, but I have left it on the crop modes. And then one thing that is really important to me, at least in these cameras, and it's going to be something that probably sets it apart from the older like LX100 series, and then also the Leica DLX8, is going to be that this is a newer processor, a much newer sensor as well. We have the GH7 and the G9 sensor in here. And then from what I'm told, it's the processor and stuff from like the S1 Mark II. So you're getting much, much, much better subject recognition and autofocus. There's not a lot of times where this camera is hunting at all. We have phase detection, autofocus points. And while it's not on like Sony's level here, in my opinion at least, it is still good enough. The camera generally knows what I'm doing. My only real critique of it at this point is that I've been using this just for everything. So for people, for objects, all sorts of stuff. It doesn't have an auto subject detection feature. So I usually have it on tracking autofocus when I'm doing photography. But when I want to do like a person, I do have to switch it between subject and not subject. So if I just have it on regular tracking, works great for objects. But if I have it on like a subject tracking autofocus and I'm trying to do photos of like an object and track that object, it just doesn't work as well. So one of the things I did was on the top here, we have a little button on top of this dial. I just moved it between subject tracking and not having subject tracking on, and it's worked totally fine for me. But it is one of the like slight annoyances that you do have to kind of have that in your mind, but something I wanted to flag because I don't think I've seen other people talk about it at least. Now, something else I haven't noticed other people talk about, and it's incredibly subtle, but I figured I would at least kind of like put it out there. And I absolutely adore this colorway. I think that there is just a lot of like historical precedence for this camera being in this style. Obviously, this isn't actually titanium, but you're getting that kind of like 90s titanium look. I do think that the silver and the black look fine. If I was buying the black one, I would probably remove the white paint of the Lumix logo on the front. All these are personal preferences. My nitpick though is that there was a couple spots on here where like the gold, rose goldy look is just slightly different. So the main body and everything is that like rose gold color. And then we have just a couple little spots, like this little lens indicator switch has like a slightly more like bluish tint to it. The button that's on top of this little control dial here just isn't exactly the same color. I don't obviously know what things they're doing here, but it's hard to tell. It's like the smallest of nitpicks. It is like the most OCD of things to even notice, but it's one of the things that like I kind of went like, oh, is that button's not actually the same color. I'm sure it was a difficult process to get things to match even as close as they are, but it's something that I would toss out there because I don't think I've seen anybody else mention it, and it's something that I can tell maybe some other people might have issue with, and figured I'd at least flag it. So all that to say, I think this camera is great. It's something that I probably would not have picked up on my own. I think that I probably would have been scared of the Micro Four Thirds sensor. I probably wouldn't have been stoked on the zoom lens concept. But after using it, it's absolutely changed my mind. I think that this camera has been incredibly useful. It's made me think about photography in a different way. It's made me less worried about the art of photography with this camera in particular, and more focused on just getting images that I wanted to get. It's been great to bring to baseball games. It's been great to bring to the store. It's been great to just bring on walks with my family. I brought it everywhere. Not that you can't do that with other cameras, not that you can't do that with the S9, but the mindset shift for me, at least, of like, I'm just here to make memories, to create them, to capture them with this camera, and the ability to just zoom in and grab a quick photo of something and then take them from the Lumix Lab app and like text them to a friend or text them to my family or whatever, has been the reason that this camera has been on me for so much longer than I needed to even use to make some image samples for this video. It's legitimately been a joy to use, and Lumix, if you're watching this, obviously you can get this camera back at any time. It's not mine. It says sample on this, so if you need to send it out to somebody else, you can. But I would love to keep this camera around and keep it for as long as I possibly can. So thanks so much for watching. If you're interested in buying this particular model, I believe there's like an affiliate thing that YouTube specifically has like the Panasonic store on. So if you click that, that would be great, because the only way you can order this colorway is directly from Lumix. If you want to order the other colorways, I will have links down in the description. All those are small affiliate links, and it would be great if you ordered it through those links so I can get a couple dollars, which helps me justify making more videos like this. And if you like more videos like this, you like the style of this video, please consider subscribing. And if you want to watch a video on my Sony RX1R III, you can do that up here. Watch my video on the S9, my 2-year review on the S9 up here, and I will see you in one of those videos.